How's it going, friends? It's Cameron from Venus Theory, and welcome back to another episode of The Sauce, the show where I talk about gear, plugins, and my own 13 herbs and spices when it comes to music production. In today's video, we're here to check out a really exciting update to the Reason Rack VST. As I'm sure you know, the Reason Rack VST is one of my favorite things in life, and I've discussed it at quite a bit of length on this channel in the past. So just a couple days ago, the folks over at Reason Studios released the 11.2 update for Reason and the Rack VST, which I think is one of the most significant milestones for the Rack VST since it was released. This update includes two very exciting new things, including a rhythm generator called Beatmap, which we'll be exploring today, as well as MIDI Out from the Reason Rack. It has finally happened, and I am so excited. As I've talked about before, Reason includes tons of instruments, effects, and sounds, and all sorts of great stuff. It is absolutely badass for both production and sound design, and this new update takes it up to a whole nother level. With this new update, you can harness the power of all of the existing players, as well as the new Beatmap rhythm generator with whatever VST you want with MIDI Out. So you could run this into Serum, you could run this into hardware, you can do a whole lot of things with it. It's pretty cool. To see all the details about this new update and learn more about Reason, you can check the link down in the description below. So without further ado, let's hop into the DAW and check it out. Okay, so here we are in Bitwig, and I want to kick this off by showing this here. This is a project I've made using Beatmap and the new MIDI Out function. So this drum machine here is just a Beatmap that's going out to a drum kit here I made with a few effects. Down here is my melodic stuff. This is a Reason Rack using Beatmap as a musical generator because all Beatmap does is output notes, so you can certainly use it to create music. That feeds into an ARP here, and I've got some stuff going on with some LFOs that we'll take a look at in more detail. And then finally, another one here. This is another Beatmap in another ARP and another LFO. These both are going into Dune 3, which goes into a bit of reverb. All of that said, let's take a listen. That is one of the most exciting things I've done with Reason yet. So to kick things off in this video, let's start by exploring Beatmap and talking about what it is and what it does. So this is a fresh Rack plugin here with just a Beatmap loaded up. This is actually a very smart and very nifty little thing. And like I mentioned, you can not only use this as a rhythm generator, but as a musical generator, because you can see here, you can indicate what notes you want it to play. So for the musical elements of that track, I just set these to be notes of a chord across a few octaves. And there we go, we get a nice musical generator. Now, an important thing to note is that this is not purely generative and random. This is actually algorithmic. So it's smart in the rhythm that it generates because it's setting it up to be a usable drum pattern every time. And I'm sure it's based off a lot of different drum rhythms and common musical themes and whatever with drums and percussion patterns. So it's actually really great at just coming up with a bunch of different drum beats, and you can just infinitely explore it. I'm not entirely sure how deep the algorithm is, but if you start just hitting the random density button and spawn XY, which we'll talk about here in a moment, I haven't really heard anything repeat itself, which is very exciting. So let's begin by breaking down the interface of Beatmap here. So within each of these drums, there's a handful of controls. So kick, we have the density, which is the probability, I guess, or complexity is another way to think of it. So if we go down, it's going to be less dense. If we go up, it's going to be more dense. So there's going to be more kick drums and things happening. XY we'll talk about here in just a moment. This is the note. You can set this to be whatever you would like. And then mirror adds a mirror or kind of an accent rhythm. This is actually a very cool feature that allows you to very quickly create some extremely complex drum patterns. So we'll touch on that in a moment as well. But that's it for each of these. So you get a mirror, you get an XY lock, and a density control, and a note control. Over here to the left, we have run, which allows us to run it. You're not going to hear anything right now because I have nothing plugged in, but you see the LEDs start blinking. Random density, which randomizes the density, which is actually pretty handy. And it doesn't randomize the mirror, which is nice. So it doesn't affect that. You can kind of dial that in, but you can use the random density just to iterate on patterns as soon as you find a groove that you like. Spawn XY instantly changes the XY coordinates of the map explorer, which we're going to talk about in a bit more detail in just a moment. Then we have learn key. This is actually a very handy function I will demonstrate shortly as well, but in short, this allows us to play a key and it will learn it to that control. So the learn key function is actually handy for musical stuff as well, because I could play notes of a chord on my MIDI controller and then have those locked in as that drum pad. Over here to the right, we just have a few controls for rate, shuffle, so you can add some shuffle, and the reset step. I believe the reset step determines the pattern length, but I'm not totally sure on that. So let's talk about this map thing. You see, as I click and drag, we get to explore this map, and you'll see down here the X and Y coordinates change. This is basically the fun of Beatmap, because this is what changes the algorithm, and we get to explore different rhythms this way. It's actually a really intuitive and kind of ingenious way to come up with rhythms. It's a lot of fun, actually. So let's shut up and actually have some drums going now. Let's bring in a Kong, and we can just drag this down because we're going to skip over the MIDI out and hit run, and we'll start hearing some drums right away. Okay, cool. So I'm going to drop this just a bit so my headphones aren't exploding. And let's just start exploring the map here for a minute. So you'll see the position on the map changes the groove. And if we adjust the density of something, let's drop these down, you'll see that this kind of green represents the kick, I think. Not sure. If we bring in more snare, we get some extra lines, hat, percussion. So it's actually kind of cool. The random density, like I said, randomizes the density of all of these drums. Spawn XY instantly randomizes the XY coordinates. And then we can add mirror, which adds another layer. So if I remember right, the mirror is actually being triggered every 2 gate triggers that the drum above it receives, but I don't quite remember. In any case, it's cool. As you can hear, the drum pattern gets a lot more complex once we start implementing the mirror. Let's drag in another drum kit here. Okay, so let's start changing some stuff. Okay, so let's say we really like the kick groove here, but we don't like the other elements. We can lock the XY position of the kick and then randomize again. So I like that hat. I don't like that snare. Let's try again. Okay. Sweet. So now we can lock that and we're good. And then we can just randomize the density. It'll keep that same groove, but it'll change the density of the triggers. And that is pretty much all you need to know about Beatmap. It's very, very, very cool. On the backside here, if we flip the rack around, you see we get a handful of other things we can control. So we have CV inputs for density in, we have gate out, so we can send these to different things. You have a reset step trigger in here. We have map controls here, or the output of the map can control different things as well. So overall, it's a very, very powerful thing. Unfortunately, I didn't really have time in the making of this video to do anything super crazy complex, but I will break down how I've used it to create some music here. So Beatmap is really cool, and I think it's really one of the more interesting players in Reason now, and that's a pretty fun thing. So let's talk about the MIDI out function as well as using Beatmap in a musical context. Okay, so let's take a look at one of the musical tracks here. This is one of the Dune 3 instances, and this is running off of Beatmap here. So what I did to do this is hit learn key and then click and then enter a note with my MIDI keyboard, and boom, away we go. So I've got a nice C minor 7 chord with a 4th in there, and that's pretty much all I did. And then I just kind of played around with a few things, mostly the mirror controls, to get something interesting and cool. So if we play this right now, we'll get rid of the ARP. I'm then sending this out with MIDI Out. So this MIDI Out device allows me to feed this into Dune 3 here. So I just created a basic patch in Dune. Nothing too crazy, just some LFOs and sample and holdy stuff. Down here, these LFOs are being wired in as well, so we can flip the rack and take a look. So the output of these LFOs is targeting the density of the kick, snare, hat, and percussion, as well as the map XY. So this allows things just to move around and be generative, but algorithmic, so that the rhythms aren't maybe too crazy, but we get something that's a bit more interesting and complex, I think, and a bit more musical than something truly generative and random. And it's very pretty to listen to. So that then feeds into the dual arpeggio here. This is transposing up because I have two layers. This is the first layer of musical bits and bobs. So this arpeggiator plays based on the notes coming out of the beat map. Just makes it nice and sparkly and fun. So that goes into Dune, and then that feeds into Cloud Seed, which is an amazing free reverb that you need if you don't have it. You can Google Cloud Seed reverb to find it. It's pretty wicked and great for those kind of long, washy things. So below that, I've got another instance of the Reason Rack feeding into another instance of Dune 3 here. So this is a very similar setup, just with some different density and stuff. I've got another LFO here, and since this is sample and hold, it's going to be different sample and hold values than the first Dune 3 layer, and it's going into all the same controls. I actually just duplicated the rack and then tweaked the density of a few items, and now if we play this one, and this is also a bit slower, transposed up another octave. Changed the Dune patch slightly. This has some FM and stuff, but other than that, it's identical. And then that feeds into another Cloud Seed here. So let's stop this, and we'll run both of these Dune layers here. Let's mute this. And let's just start spawning XY. We'll open up the other one here. Cool. I think I'm pretty happy with that. And that is the power of MIDI Out. Now, I can't show it in this video due to how I have to route things, but I can also send this out to my hardware synthesizers. So I did a couple patches just to test it out where I was sending things to my Digitone, which was a hell of a lot of fun. Since this is Reason and you can access any of the players and utilize MIDI Out, you can also use the quad note generator, which can create some insanely pretty and complex things. So let's set this to like a, I don't know, pentatonic, minor pentatonic thing in C, and we can play these together now, and now we'll have the quad note generator functioning on the top sparkly RP Dune layer. And that is pretty wicked. I think this is a lot of fun, and since I can use my other synths or hardware synths with the same stuff, it's just very, I don't know, time-consuming in a great way. I had a lot of late nights when I got the beta version of this, just exploring different patches and things, because you can, just the quad note generator alone, I think, is really exciting to use with hardware synths, especially. Just being able to send that to my Digitone and to my Novation Peak, I was able to get some really pleasant, just kind of abstract things and sound beds just to listen to. So now let's take a look at this drum patch here. So this is not really anything too different. I'm still using the beat map. I'm just using it for drums instead. So this is set to C1, C#1. You get the idea. I didn't really do much here. I just tweaked a few things and then just used the straight up MIDI out. So that feeds into this drum machine here. This is using a bunch of samples from my Mori sample pack, and I'm just creating kind of a nice shuffly, skippy thing here. We can play that and take a listen. So I'm feeding that into some PSP stuff here, vintage warmer and old timer. Got a little bit of delay. Delay feedback has some effects in it. PSP mix saturator here just for some kind of crunch and oomph, and then a twin L here on the end for a bit more smacky, slappy goodness. So this is a really great thing. I really like using the Beatmap just to create drum sequences for stuff. And honestly, this is a really nice pattern that I would honestly use in a song. And I think this is a cool way to work because it allows me to quickly iterate some ideas and get things I maybe wouldn't think of on my own, because I think that's half of the fun with generative and algorithmic composition, is that you are still the composer, you are just being aided with a set of ideas, and the true skill and composition comes down to your personal taste in deciding what you keep, what you use, and what you iterate on yourself. So let's explore this just a bit more by adding some shuffle, just so you can get an idea of what that adds. So yeah, we can get some nice kind of skippy, groovy garage drums here without a whole lot of effort, which I'm all about. Okay, so let's bring in a little bit of some perfect room here on the drum bus. And let's bring in our instrument layers and take a listen to what we've created. And now let's explore a little bit more of Beatmap. And that is my overview for the 11.2 update to the Reason Rack VST. I think with the Beatmap and with the quad note generator and now with MIDI Out and all the other players and stuff inside of Reason, this easily makes the Reason Rack VST now kind of a must-have thing in my opinion. Like I said earlier, the fact that this also allows me to do all this same kind of stuff but with hardware is just really, really wicked. I wish I could show you guys, and I do hope to do a video on that in the future once I figure out a better way to route and configure the audio for such a thing. Overall, I don't really have any complaints about this update. However, if there's anything I would like to see added, it would be this. So within Beatmap here, I think this is really great, and I like the fact that we have X and Y inputs and outputs, but I would really love to see some kind of gate or trigger receiver for random density and spawn XY. I mean, spawn XY effectively is the input CV here, but I would love a way to trigger the randomized density function. I don't know how CV works inside of the Reason Rack in like the gory detail and if that's something that's possible to implement, but at least a way to do that would be very cool and allow for some insanely complex things that would just make for a really great kind of background music tool, or just, you know, rhythm randomness designer while still having the algorithmic sensibility that Beatmap offers. One other thing I think is significant enough to be of note is that CC output is a bit hit or miss at the moment. This is something that depends on your DAW and stuff. I ran into some questions with it and pestered the folks at Reason Studios incessantly. But they were able to help me get that resolved and just let me know that this is something that's kind of a Bitwig thing, that I'm not able to utilize CC output, at least at the moment. But if Bitwig fixes some stuff that's some developer-y stuff that's a bit beyond the scope of my understanding, that will hopefully eventually work. So keep that in mind, that CC output may or may not work. It just depends on your host. If you have questions on that, you can contact Reason Support or your DAW maker, because I guess it's a VST3 thing. That's really all I can say about that, but that is something I feel that you should know and something to just keep in mind. Other than those two things, I have no complaints about this update. This is absolutely badass. I think it's a lot of fun, and that's one of the big things to me, is I like things that I simply enjoy. I just want to play with it and kind of goof off, and that's something that it's a very, very big value to me. So, random tangent aside, in the words of Forrest Gump, that is all I have to say about that. To the developers of Reason, well done. 2 thumbs up. This is awesome. This has been something I've been waiting for, and I was so excited to see it finally happen. So hats off to you guys. Very good stuff. Very good stuff. So yeah, I think that about does it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys again soon.